I want to start right off the bat. This crop has one of my favorite pieces of potential X-Men casting and some of the most ludicrous X-Men casting I have seen rumored so far. We're going to talk about all of it. Because obviously after Secret Wars and all that is done, Marvel wants to make an X-Men movie set in the MCU with original characters, recasting maybe everybody. We'll see about some of the people like Wolverine, Deadpool, maybe Laura, they could keep her around. But beyond that, new actors. And we've made many videos on this channel talking about people that have been rumored for different roles. A lot of Cyclopses, Jeans, Storms, characters you would expect to see. But we have not gotten a couple of characters, and I think that makes sense because they are tough casts. I'm talking specifically about Professor Xavier and Magneto. Here they are in action figure form, exploring each other's bodies because that's just what they do. Two of the most iconic characters in comics, Professor X, the leader of the X-Men, and Magneto, the leader of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Now, casting these guys is tricky, partially because of the ages they have to be, and the ages they have to be relative to the other characters and relative to each other because of their shared history, and also partially just because, like, this is one of those roles that we as fans have huge expectations for. We nerds were very lucky that in the days of the original X-Men movies, Patrick Stewart wanted to be Charles Xavier because he was the fan cast everybody was hoping for, and then when he got the role, it was perfect. I don't think many people expected Ian McKellen would be the Magneto, and he turned out to be, obviously, also fantastic. And then later you had James McAvoy, who is already a star at this point, and Michael Fassbender, who had an incredible career. Like, you need actors in these roles that are big presences. It is going to be hard. I don't think you could do it to cast an unknown in this role. I think these need to be the two most decorated actors in this cast, like actors with awards, at least nominations, people that you look at and go, oh, okay, him. Now, realistically, I think there's some people that are probably off limits for that reason, because they would not take a role like this, because they don't want to sign up for 5 movies, and that's, I think, being pretty generous, like probably 10 movies, honestly, for Professor X and a Magneto, because of lots of cameos, and I assume they don't plan on killing them anytime soon. And even if they do, they can come back. This is the X-Men. I'm going to talk about the Magnetos first because there's 2, and I think they're both insane. The first that was rumored is Denzel Washington. Now, I think this is preposterous for a couple of reasons. One, he mentioned that he was going to be in the new Black Panther movie, Black Panther 3. And then he was going to retire. He does not plan to act the rest of his life. He's getting up there in years, and also he's been working forever. So, like, why wouldn't he want to enjoy the rest of his life after playing all of these iconic parts and, things like the Macbeth movie that he did recently, the Othello play he's currently doing on Broadway, and being like probably the villain in the 3rd Black Panther movie? Perfect role for Denzel. One of those in and out. You can make a big impression, and then you don't have to be in 50 of these. Do I think Denzel could be a good Magneto? Of course. I think Denzel's one of our best actors. I think he is incredibly talented, and I just love watching him. So I would be interested to see his take on that character. I know people would have a problem with the fact that he is not Jewish, because that is something that people want to see represented in their Magneto, is something that historically has not been represented in our on-screen Magnetos. However, it is a humongous part of that character's backstory, so I do think there's some value in that. And I think there are plenty of really excellent actors that also happen to be Jewish that I think would love to take that role. I've heard a lot of people say pick a different genocide that he was a victim of, like the Rwandan genocide, for example. Make that Magneto's new origin story. I think there's something to keeping the Holocaust origin story and figuring out a way to make it so that he's still alive. Like, there's a million ways. I made a whole video about it on my Nando V Movies channel. But for that reason, especially because Captain America in the MCU comes from that time, like, I think having a villain come from that time is cool. And also, it was clearly meaningful to the creators of the character who fought in World War II. So, like, this is something that I think is worth keeping. So for that reason, I don't think Denzel is the best pick, but I also just don't think there is a chance he would do more than 2 of these movies. Maybe. He doesn't do sequels. That's not his bag, and that's fine. There's a couple of actors who just never do sequels. Leo doesn't do sequels. And I'm sure right now someone's going, well, there is actually one sequel. Sure, but that's not what he's known for. He's not the kind of actor that does franchise roles. He picks his projects, very deliberate with stuff like that. So, would I like to see Denzel as Magneto? Probably not. He's not my favorite Magneto. Do I think he'd do a good job? I think he'd do a fine job. I think there are actors out there that would be more reasonable picks. And I think the idea of him signing on to a franchise like this just does not feel realistic to me. That being said, the other actor that was rumored for Magneto that I find little bit more palatable in terms of his background, and B, even more preposterous to have signed on for I'm gonna guess 5-movie deal or whatever you would want from Magneto, is Daniel Day-Lewis. I know I just said this about Denzel. Daniel Day-Lewis, one of our most talented actors. This is a guy who doesn't make that many movies. He is very deliberate with the projects he picks. He's obviously won many awards. People probably most recognize him as either Lincoln in the Lincoln biopic, or as the I Would Drink Your Milkshake guy from There Will Be Blood. But he's been acting for a while, like My Left Foot, Gangs of New York, and he is also an actor who is getting up there in age. And he is an actor who just does not do this stuff. Like, these are not the roles he traditionally takes. Now, would getting him in this role be huge? Like, would that make this movie immediately interesting? And like, would people that don't usually take these movies seriously go, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to watch that X-Men movie if Daniel Day-Lewis is in it or Denzel Washington is in it? Without a doubt, people would. But that's why I don't think these are plausible at all. Now, Daniel Day-Lewis was one of the actors that I had suggested in my Magneto fan cast. But again, because I think he would do a great job with this role. He does happen to be Jewish, so he would represent that part of the character, but also just like, he's an incredible actor. He's great at playing villains. Denzel too. Like, these are two actors who can play like a hero, but are really fun scenery chewing villains. But like, I just do not buy it. Not even a little bit that Daniel Day-Lewis or Denzel Washington would sign up for this. Like I stated in my video, Jason Isaacs is younger, I believe, than Daniel Day-Lewis, and he is also Jewish, and he is perfect for Magneto. Sometimes, you know, it seems like we gotta pick the crazy pick and like, oh, this is a really out there, but sometimes it's just standing right there in front of you, and it's like, get Jason Isaacs to do this role. He's got a lot of heat coming off of White Lotus. I think this would be a very good position for him, and he is the kind of actor who will take on both prestigious projects, and like, he'll do things that are challenging, but he will also do franchises that are fun. Like, he was the voice of Brainiac in the Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League game, and that, you know, I'm sure he did a lot of work and was expecting to do work well into the future, probably not knowing the fate of that game. And he also did the Wizard movies and stuff, but he's not above genre stuff, and he's not above commitments like that. Like, I just think he would be perfect. Okay, so now we're getting into the realm, after we're done with those, of the somewhat plausible picks. So there were two other pieces of casting that I think are more interesting, because I just think they're more realistic. Number one, another rumor, and I have no idea which of these rumors is more plausible based on like the scooper and who released this information. I don't think we have like a scooper who is 100% right, and anything under that, honestly, it all feels the same. It feels like a lot of these names get thrown around and thrown out there, and that's why, like, I don't assign scores. I know there are scores for some of these guys, but I'm not trying to talk about whether I think the leak is true or good. I want to talk about just the actor themselves. Is that true or good? So the one that I think is more plausible, Professor X over here in his little Shi'ar outfit, being played by Coleman Domingo. Now, Coleman Domingo is an interesting one, because on one hand, I think he'd actually be a really, really good Professor X. I think Professor X is a character who you could change the race of without really changing too much else about the character. The same way that I think we just talked about, Magneto's nationality, his history, is very much tied to a specific period of time, specific place. I don't think Professor X's is. He is from New York, but in both of the movies that he's been in, he's been British. And usually he's, spent time overseas, but I think he feels like a more malleable character. And like, if you watch the animated series and you hear that, what voice is that? Where's this guy from? Because we know where he's from. But like, I think we've got a little bit of room to work here. I also don't think him being white is that important. I think there's things you can do with him being white, being a sort of privileged mutant who obviously also uses wheelchair sometimes, and then also has to represent this repressed minority population. But at the same time, characters that are outside of the X-Men but are mutants very frequently will look at the X-Men and be like, well, okay, we gotta live in the sewers. We're not all hoity-toity like living in a mansion. So I can see value in having that character be played by an actor who's white, but I don't think it's necessary. And Coleman Domingo, because of roles like Sing Sing, is very hot right now in Hollywood. He also seems down for this kind of stuff. He was in, I believe, the Walking Dead spinoff, and we'll get to the other thing that he was in a second. But like, he doesn't seem like an actor who would not agree to this. And he's at that perfect stage where he is an actor who would be a big get and would get people excited, but at the same time, he's not an actor like Denzel, who is at the end of his career, or who only does, really artsy projects now. Like, he seems to be recently elevated to this big time. Like, those are the people that Marvel loves to snap up. Be like, oh, you're the next big thing? All right, well, now you're in one of our movies. Not like it's like you have a choice. The way I'm saying it was like, all right, now you won an Oscar, now you have to be in 8 Marvel movies. Although sometimes maybe that's how it feels. But especially looking at Thunderbolts like Florence Pugh, Lewis Pullman, Wyatt Russell, like, these are people that are coming up big right now. And I think Coleman Domingo, while he's not the same age as those guys, is in that space as well. What other things we're working with Coleman Domingo? I think he can play a character like Professor X, who is a jerk. I think that is a completely necessary part of Professor X's identity. Like, you play him like he's Mr. Rogers, and he's this nice guy everyone loves and trusts. But I think he's way more interesting if Professor X is a guy who characters do tend to trust, but also, like, he wants things for mutant kind that sometimes will get in the way of maybe what other characters want. Maybe he's not as revolutionary, maybe he is too revolutionary, whatever it is. Like, Professor X has strong opinions, and very frequently he is on the wrong side of arguments with the X-Men. Not always, but I would say it happens more frequently than the movies tend to frame it. Except for like X-Men 3, where he is a big jerk. But it's that same thing where it's like he went from 0 to 100 in terms of being a more or less well-meaning character to someone who's like yelling at Wolverine. It's not good. Like, honestly, I don't think Dark Phoenix is a great X-Men movie, but I do think Dark Phoenix kind of gets at some of the difficulties with being Professor X and navigating the political side of mutant rights mixed with the revolutionary side of mutant rights and like, what do we do? Yeah, either way. I think Coleman Domingo is an actor who can play a nice guy, but can also play a bad guy. And we need a Professor X who can do both. The reason I think he can play a bad guy is because Coleman Domingo just got done playing Norman Osborn in the first season of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and he was fantastic. And I don't think Coleman Domingo should play Professor X is, I think Coleman Domingo should play Norman Osborn. Like, not for continuity with the cartoon, because the continuity with that is super out the window, but just because, like, he would be a fantastic Norman Osborn. Live action, he is the right age for that character. He's got the perfect amount of gravitas. I would love to see what he does, because, like, light spoilers for the show, he doesn't turn into the Green Goblin in the show yet. It's definitely something that's going to happen eventually. Like, I'd like to see what that side of him is, because that's something that with, like, Willem Dafoe, I feel like, oh, he's going to be Green Goblin. You kind of know what you're getting, but, like, I haven't seen that kind of performance from Coleman Domingo. That being said, I'm very excited for it. I think he should be cast as Norman Osborn in the MCU immediately. So then, for that reason, I don't think he can be both Norman Osborn and Professor Xavier. But if they don't want to make him Norman Osborn, then I think he'd be a fine Professor X. And I actually think this is not a bad casting choice. I could see a Coleman Domingo Professor X and a Jason Isaacs Magneto as a super reasonable pairing that I kind of like. So finally, let's talk about the piece of rumored X-Men casting that I love. Daisy Edgar-Jones for Jean Grey. So people that don't know, she just came off of Twisters. It's like the rest of these people with a lot of heat. It's not the same amount of heat as like Oscar nominee Coleman Domingo, but it's heat. And she's about to star in a movie with Denzel Washington and Robert Pattinson. So like, she's on the come up. She is 26 years old, which I love for Jean Grey. Because then, we talked about this, you want a Jean Grey who's about the same age as your Cyclops. I think, personally, you want this first class of X-Men that is at least Jean and Scott, probably Beast, although maybe Beast is older than all these guys. You want them to be in their like mid to late 20s. They have graduated this class already. Like, they are young adults. And then you'll have another class of X-Men that are like in the system right now that are high school age, maybe even also a college age class. But like, I think that's the best way to start this universe, is to have a couple different classes of X-Men. So back when like Sadie Sink was being rumored for Jean, I was like, she is too young to be that version of the character. And I actually like Harris Dickinson as Cyclops. He's one of the actors that had been rumored for Cyclops. I think him and Daisy Edgar-Jones work really well together in terms of like, they seem to be the same age. Also, I think he's got the kind of stoic cyclopsiness of like, he's the leader, he's got a lot of opinions about what he should be able to do and stuff. But then on the other side of that relationship, you have Daisy Edgar-Jones, an actor who can hold the screen against a Glenn Powell and against a giant tornado, and then also has a look that, and this isn't necessarily the Jean Grey look, but it is something that I kind of associate with Jean Grey. She kind of has that 60s look, that like Mod Squad 60s, 70s, but like kind of from that era. Now, I don't know how to describe it. I'm not good at this, describing, fashion, but I will say the first thing that happened when people were talking about Daisy Edgar-Jones, I Googled just the pictures of her because I thought, does she look like Jean Grey? Does she have the Jean Greyness? And while she does not have, red hair, so there's that. Although, as I've been saying for many years, there's a lot of nice wigs that you are allowed to wear, and frankly, all of these actors do anyway. But I guess I would say a lot of it is fashion sense and hair and stuff like that. But I don't know. She looks like Jean Grey in that she looks like a product of like a slightly older time. And I love that about Jean Grey. I know I'm not doing a great job of describing this, but like if it is set in 2025 or whatever year it will be when this comes out, so 2028 or 2030 or whatever, I like that Jean is older than the rest of the X-Men and feels like a character from like a slightly different time. I think Jean is supposed to be somewhat composed. She's not necessarily like Storm, where she's a goddess, and obviously when she gets the Phoenix power, she's very dangerous, but she is steady in the same way that Cyclops is steady, in a way that someone like, say, Jubilee is not. So I'm not doing a great job of describing it, but I do think she's in a really good position for a Jean Grey role. And I think if she would take Twisters, I mean, that's a sequel. She wasn't in the original Twister, but she's not above doing that kind of work. Like, she's not an actor who takes himself so seriously that they would never do a comic book movie. And she's young enough that I think she could sign on for like 10 movies. I think she could talk to someone like Elizabeth Olsen. And Elizabeth Olsen be like, listen, it's hard, but it's fun. You make a lot of money and you get to do pretty much whatever you want for the rest of your career, as long as it works out, and get convinced to do this. And I personally think she's my favorite Jean so far that I've seen cast, fan casts or otherwise. And I hope that like her, Hera Stixon, some of the other actors we've talked about, we're still working on Storms. I think Jodie Turner-Smith is still the best Storm out there. I think right now I can see an X-Men led by Coleman, Domingo, some of these other characters, and I'm excited. It makes me very excited that we may be finding this out soon. These characters and actors coming to focus. It's feeling real, and that's really cool. And you know what else is cool? This video's sponsor, Nebula. Oh, Nebula. We're talking about Nebula. Nebula is a subscription streaming service that I helped to create. Supporting Nebula is the best way to support this channel. All my videos go up early, ad-free. For videos like this, maybe a day early, maybe 6 hours early. For videos on Nando V Movies, maybe a month early. A lot of it depends on the production schedule, but you will see my videos before anybody else sees them. There's also all kinds of great Nebula original content like Jet Lag, but also documentaries and also, fiction stuff that we're working on. I'll probably talk more about that soonish. And like, just go to Nebula, look around, we'll find cool stuff by cool people. Abolish Everything, I love that. I was at a taping in one of those. I haven't performed, but I mean, I was in the audience at it, which is kind of performing. You're laughing and clapping and stuff, and you're part of the show as far as I'm concerned. And a year of Nebula is already a steal at $60, which is like $5 a month. But if you go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut, you can get a year Nebula for $36. That is $3 a month. It is an incredible deal. Go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut. You'll be happy that you did. But anyway, that's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you around.